Hey guys, VaulSC here, hope that you're doing well. I am a bit overdue to show you guys a bat rep from recent times. This is going a while back. Played against Old Dominion, so it's a classic 100 Kingdoms versus Old Dominion game, but it's from a few weeks ago, so I'm going to do my best to remember the play-by-play and the lists, but generally it was a very good game. Had some good photographs out of it, so let's go ahead and take a look. Last argument, 2,000 points, as always. So, going to my list first, I was playing a bit of a meme list for this one. This is not really, the best way you can play 100 Kingdoms, as you're about to see. So we have the Priory Commander with the Crimson Dawn and Ashen, Crimson Tower and Ashen Dawn. The reason why this isn't really played very much in tournaments is that you've got two heavy regiments here that do not have a flank. So if you pick, for example, the Ashen Dawn to come in on turn 3, you've got to roll for the Crimson Tower. They may end up coming on in turn 4, and it's just a little bit too late to arrive to the battlefield. In my opinion, they are still pretty good regiments, though. Caledburn is a really amazing item for the Priory Commander because it will affect his amazing impact hits, as well as his 6 attacks there, with Flurry obviously doing a ton of damage, so it's still very powerful. It's just very slow in the current meta. Then we've got the Imperial Officer, who is currently not really one of the best Imperial, best 100 Kingdoms characters, I should say, but he does have flank, so he allows the Steel Legion to come on automatically turn 3, but again, we're playing a very slow list here, which is, not advisable in today's day and age. Hunter Cadre, love them though, one of my favorite regiments. Chapter Mage, as always, with the School of Water, probably better off going Fire Mage at the moment, just given the sheer amount of Tenacious 2 against shooting stuff that's out there with Sorcerer Kings and Euroni, but I still like Water. It's still a pretty good spell there for the healing. And then we have another Imperial Officer, so you can see it's a bit of a meme list. I wouldn't recommend taking this to a tournament. It's a bit silly. I've got my Militia Bowmen there as well, because I just recently painted them and really love them, but he's going to sit in the 5 Gilded Legion, and he's got the Seize the Advantage, so that all of your Imperial combat units, so all 2 of them, the Gilded Legion and the Steel Legion, can get a bit more of an activation bonus of 2 inches to charge when they're entouraging with the officer. And then we've got some more shooting regiments. So yeah, bit of a fun list, not really all that serious, but let's see how it goes against the Old Dominion. So over here, just basic recollection from what he played. This is going back a few weeks ago. Fallen Divinity, they did spell out that you are allowed to use Eternal Discipline with it now. There was a bit of a snafu there over the rules with that one. I mean, it's obviously designed for the Fallen Divinity in mind, but the rules as written, it wasn't possible to use it, so they FAQ'd that. So right now, I think the Fallen Divinity, is playable, but it's still not considered one of the better options, just in the bigger scheme of things. The Fallen Divinity is quite killable at Tier 1 and Tier 2, but when you get to Tier 3, you're killing your own regiments, and it can be quite hard to play in that sense compared to the other options. Kanephors, as always, very, very good. Archimandrite, great warband. Kheres, they've been a bit, I don't want to say nerfed, but they've definitely been played around with a lot by old Parabellum, and they're not really quite the unit they used to be, but that's okay. Moroi, also useful there as well. I love the Archimandrite and the Praetorian Guard, though. I think that's a really cool way of playing him. It means that he can sort of get up in the thick of it and always have really good options for his spells, and obviously the Praetorian Guards love the healing, and they love the +1 to the Dark Power Pool, Memories of Old type thing. And then over here, my opponent bringing in 2 units of Centaurs. They are not the best regiment at the moment. Their Memories of Old isn't particularly helpful, and it just a barrage for volley 2, range 14. They're not amazing, and with the deadly shot, that kind of runs into some issues with all of the stuff out there that has Tenacious against shooting and reroll 6s, of course. But they look cool, and just a fun game. I'm also playing a bit of a meme list, so my opponent just playing the models that he wants to play. So let's just dive into it. We've got the mission here, Maelstrom. This is the one where only scoring from zones gives you points. There's nothing for killing. There's no objectives other than the zones. And at the start of and end of the game, you get more from the middle circle, whereas through the midsection of the game, you get more from the side zones. Excuse me. So if we look at this here, we have the 3 zones. You can see them as the transparent circles in the middle of the table. 3 forests. We've got a little statue there and a house that's impassable. And, of course, 3 size 2 hills, and that is the table. So, turn one, I'm just bringing on a few light regiments. My opponent obviously will come on with his Hierodeacon and Cultists and maybe some of his Ghosts, but most of my army is heavy, of course. So Fallen Divinity going straight up the middle, but not quite the middle. This is sort of off-center, really, mid to the right, going into the forest just because he's a little bit afraid of shooting for later on, whereas I'm bringing on my crossbows onto this hill over here. And then he's got his Centaurs coming on the right-hand side nearby to the Fallen Divinity as well. So I've decided to bring my Mage and her friends into this little forest here in front of the middle objective. There is the Hierodeacon with the Cultists just deploying opposite the Mage onto their own hill. And we've got another unit of Centaurs coming out the flank. So with my opponent bringing everything on his right flank, which is my left, I think that I can safely ignore this part of the battlefield for a while and generally set up elsewhere, because I don't want to give him too many opportunities in terms of his shooting and his attacks straight away. So there you can see it. That's where we ended up after turn one. My opponent committing hard to the left-hand side here and me with just the 2 crossbows so far. So turn two, we're bringing in the Militia Bowmen and some Hunter Cadre. They have flank, and then everything else just as normal. So Fallen Divinity just camping around in the forest, doesn't want to come too close to me, still at tier 1. We've got some crossbows moving backwards off of the hill, because I don't want them moving forward with his centaurs and then shooting me, or moving forward so that they can attack in the following turn. So just playing it cagey. I can't score with this regiment. I can't really contest very well with them. No point losing them, so just bringing them back. Over here, the Centaurs just marching up. You can see one of them has been mashed there. He's got one stand missing because of the Hierodeacon. He possibly has an item to make his Dark Shepherding longer. You might have noticed there were 20 points missing in that list that I just showed you, just because I can't remember what he actually took there. So for some reason, we've lost a Centaur. It is because of Dark Shepherd, and we move on. All right, Militia Bowmen, my favorite regiment in the game, just sitting there, just going to waddle away towards the middle of the table and find something to do, just in general. Then we have the Praetorians with the Archimandrite just coming in behind the screen of Cultists there. These two regiments can work together in terms of Dark Shepherd and healing regiments back, or whatever they need to do, just supporting each other, going directly towards the center of the table. And then my Hunter Cadre coming up the right-hand side. I know that he still hasn't deployed his Caryatids, or what do you call those things? Having a mental blank there. It is Kanephors that I'm talking about. Hopefully he brings the Kanephors on this side, because the Hunter Cadre are quite good at them, good at shooting them with Fiend Hunter. And of course the Hunter Cadre can score, so that's why we're bringing them on there. Over here we've just got a little bit of a spell shenanigans, of course, Dark Supplication and whatnot. And I've got the other unit of Hunter Cadre coming in exactly opposite the Fallen Divinity, because if she leaves that forest to go and stand on a zone somewhere, I might be able to get a few pot shots off with the fiend hunting Hunter Cadre, and that Fallen Divinity is probably the biggest fiend they've ever seen, so good opportunity for them. Left-hand side, still doing nothing with the crossbows. There's no point moving onto that hill, as you can see, because they will just get shot at by the deadly horse archers there, the centaurs. So we have a unit of Moroi. These guys are opposite my right flank here, up against the Hunter Cadre. I'm pretty sure this is Moroi. He may have just proxied some more Kheres. I just can't quite remember that facet of this game, but not too important. We have some ghosts here. Speaking of ghosts, there is the Kheres next to the Fallen Divinity and the Praetorians, just marching in through there and going 2 wide so that they can fit. Of course, this is a regiment that doesn't really need to be 3 wide. They're just there to get their spell off. That's what they do. And then we have some Praetorians, some Legionnaires. On the extreme right-hand flank for me, this is his left-hand flank, just hopping into that forest. They're going to try and march up onto that side zone and use their Memories of Old to hopefully contest it. So that's where we get to end of turn 2. You can see that on my right flank there, it's just my Hunter Cadre going onto that zone, and he's got his Moroi and Legionnaires. On the left-hand flank is where he's deployed most stuff, with the Praetorians slowly plodding away towards the middle of the zone, and still nobody's scoring anything just yet. So turn 3 is where I bring on pretty much the rest of my army, and we've got flank coming in with the Imperial Officer, the Steel Legion, and the Gilded Legion, and we're auto-picking the Knights of the Crimson Tower to arrive. But you can sort of see the weakness here. I roll for Ashen Dawn, don't get them, so the Ashen Dawn will come in turn 4, and it's going to take a long time for them to get into battle, and I need them to be into battle because they're my strongest regiment, basically. So this is why this particular list isn't particularly great, but it's fun. So let's move on. Okay, so we have the Praetorians just leapfrogging the Cultists here. They want to get onto that hill so that they can then move on to the objective. And I believe my opponent did an entourage here where he soups up the boys there, and then they use their automatic Memories of Old for Bastion, and they march up this way. We've got the little heroes of the day, the Militia Bowmen, moving opposite them, just ready to take the brunt of a charge and maybe get in the way of the Praetorians before they move onto the zone and just mess with their positioning. Then we have the Steel Legion, marching on through here with Vanguard from the Imperial officer, just coming in behind the Mage, and they will be leapfrogging the Mage's regiment next turn to go onto the objective against the Praetorians, and hopefully they can get some damage done against the Praetorians with their big old swords. Over here, this is just another look at the side here, nothing really going on. His Centaur is just not bothering really to move much further up. I believe they are lights anyway, so I don't think they can even score on the right-hand side. No, they changed them to lights. That's a recent development, so can't really come in on score in this zone, so unfortunately that is a drawback for them. Gilded Legion coming on the right-hand flank. These guys are going to march up onto that zone and hopefully score it for the rest of the game after they've chomped on those Legionnaires. So then we have the Moroi moving up, just ready to countercharge anything that might move onto that zone and trying to take a bit of cover in that forest. Not that they need it, they are ghosts after all, so not to worry too much. And then we have the Crimson Tower Knights going to appear between the Steel Legion and the Gilded Legion. And the hope is to get a march charge onto something in front of those bowmen. And the Militia Bowmen are going to be there to screen them and protect until I have an opportunity to get in there and do the damage with the severe impact hits and the Caledburn and everything like that. So these guys hopefully will hit the flank of the Praetorians in the next turn or two, or will be able to combat whatever he brings in nearby to that house on the upper left of your screen. So Hunter Cadre just taking a few pot shots at the Moroi, not expecting very much from that shooting. And then we have the Fallen Divinity still just hanging back, just doesn't want to commit to the fight until it gets towards tier 3 basically, which I think is a little bit of a mistake. I think that if you play the Fallen Divinity, you should really be going full steam ahead into your opponent, even if it means taking a few shots. It's going to allow the rest of your army to move into position. You can always move it backwards later, and it's got that forest there. At least be sticking out the corner of the forest. And the thing is, the game is not lost if your Fallen Divinity dies. I think the best way to play it is to commit it so hard that you get the value out of the healing from moving up from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3, and then lose it, as it hits tier 3, meaning that your rest of your army is not going to die from its activations. And that way the Fallen Divinity has created enough disruption and enough of a hole that you can actually blast your opponent. And all of the power now goes to the Dark Power pool as far as I can recall. So I think that playing aggressively with the Fallen Divinity is the way to go for sure. But we're not really seeing that here. Instead, we've just got a little bit of cagey play. So the Crossbowmen here moving forward a little bit to shoot at the Praetorians. Just not expecting very much from that because of their high armor. Over here, we've still got the other crossbows hanging back behind the zone. There's no need to do anything, because as you see on the left-hand side, I've committed one unit of crossbows here. He's got both of his centaurs there, and neither of us can score that because we're all light, so that's good for me. On the extreme right-hand side, the Gilded Legion should easily be able to mop up that whole flank, so it's really just going to be down to the middle. And in the middle, I've got, quite a lot of regiments to hopefully box that in. I've got both Hunter Cadre, I've got the crossbows, I've got the Militia Bowmen, I've got the Knights, and I've got the Steel Legion, so that's going to be the game plan. All right, we're going to turn 4. I've got everything on the field now. We're just going to go with the Hunter Cadre first to get the shooting in and the movement, and then we'll follow up with the heavy stuff way later in the game, or in the turn. So my opponent activating his Archimandrite here, obviously to buff up the boys, and then over here the Hunter Cadre just getting more shots into the Moroi, whatever they need to do. You can see in the far distance, he has brought those Kanephors on next to that house, so the Hunter Cadre will be very interested in going after those guys That is if the Crimson Towers don't get to them first. So that's what's happening here. Just moving forward a bit, getting a few long-range pot shots there with the Hunter Cadre. So we now have the Praetorians on the zone, and they're a bit too far away from the Steel Legion for the Steel Legion to just charge them straight away, but I can march charge, of course. And then the bowmen and the crossbows that I've got here just won't really be able to do much damage against all of that bastion, is the thinking. So over here we've got the Militia Bowmen. These guys are just moving directly up here so that they can just sit there. They know that if they get charged by Praetorians, they're not going to care. I can lose that unit and it'll just put his Praetorians in a bad position. And they also offer a bit of a screen against the Kanephors later on. But if my opponent just doesn't attack me at all, then these guys are just going to get in the way. They're going to start shooting. They're going to be extremely annoying. And that's what they do. So we've got the Kheres continuing to move up here, just getting ready to blast some spells against whatever happens to run into the Praetorians a little bit later. And then we have the Mage, point-blank range. It's a bit sad that she didn't choose the Fire School here. Just hasn't really got the mileage out of the Water School in this case. But firing a few bolts into the Praetorians, not expecting much damage though. We have the Moroi over here, just not quite ready to deal with the Hunter Cadre just yet. I get the vague feeling that this regiment might actually have been Kheres, and he may have been proxying the Moroi as Kheres. I just can't remember what happened during that game, because it was a few weeks back now. So over here, yeah, we've seen the crossbows against the Praetorians. Let's move on. Okay, so this is important. He's finally moving up with a unit of Legionnaires behind the Centaurs, and this is going to mean that if nothing else happens, he's going to be able to march those guys onto the zone and start scoring on this side of the table, which is quite important because I really only have my two, shooters there, so I might have to bring the Ashen Dawn over here. We then have the Hierodeacon trying to get some shots off there with, I believe, his damage spell. He is on the hill so we can see over the Praetorians, trying to mop up the Militia Bowmen, but I think he turned out to be out of range for that spell. So they're just sitting around the back here. We're also looking at the Praetorians, which actually have taken enough damage now that they have lost a stand and taken a couple of extra wounds, and I think that's because of the point-blank shots of the Mage and the crossbows just getting up in there with aimed shots. So that's probably why they've taken that damage. Over here, we've got the Centaurs moving onto the zone, just starting to slowly, prep forward a little bit more so that we can get the Legionnaires on there to take over. That's their thing. And on this side, the other regiment marching all the way up as well, but just because they want to try and finally put some pressure on the 100 Kingdoms line, get rid of those shooters, and then threaten the center later on if I don't bring anything else on. So over here, now that he's moved in range, I've decided to move up with my crossbows, start firing at the Centaurs, and we'll just make that little combat happen. Over here, we've got some Hunter Cadre continuing to shoot at the Centaurs, and as you can see here, the Fallen Divinity still has not moved up, which I think is a mistake. I think you need to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more active with your Fallen Divinity, especially if you've invested the points for Eternal Discipline, which he has. So he finally brings it to the edge of the forest here, just waiting for that opportunity to make a charge next turn or move on to some particular zone. All right, Gilded Legion, moving forward, just completely setting up camp here. These guys are going to be able to score for the rest of eternity, and they're just ready to defend against my opponent's stuff there, the Legionnaires and the Kheres or the Moroi or whatever they are. And then, of course, we've got the Kanephors moving up, and this is a move plus reform because he couldn't quite get past that house. So the strong thing about their position is that they are going to be able to charge my knights if I go into the flank of the Praetorians. And the knights might just be a little bit too far away from the Kanephors to get a march charge onto them. And the Kanephors, of course, with Blessed and Hardened, are quite good against those knights. But, of course, the Hunter Cadre are there as well, so with a double team, I might be able to make it work. So there are the knights there. I've moved forward, and I've also got the Ashen Dawn coming in behind them. Now, this decision here, I think, is a mistake from me. The reason why I say that is because there's an opportunity on the left-hand side flank to go after the Centaurs and really direct his Fallen Divinity away from the center of the table. So if I do that, then I can probably win in the center and the right-hand flank. And if he doesn't, move over to that side with his Fallen Divinity and goes into the center, you can pretty safely bet that, 1 unit of crossbows plus 1 unit of Ashen Dawn is going to beat 2 Centaurs and 1 Legionnaires. The Ashen Dawn are just that good in the late game that you can expect that to happen. But I've put them here, which is regrettable. The other thing I've decided to do, because I think I've got the advantage next turn for the supremacy roll, is I've decided to march charge into these guys here to get a lot of impact hits in through the side. And because they get line breaker on the march charge, they can get around Bastion, which is important. And the next turn, I can also use the supremacy to give out hardened and +1 attack or whatever I've got there against the Kanephors. And the Kanephors, if they do charge me, I've got the Hunter Cadre to go after them straight away. So that's why I've done this. And the attack does turn out to be devastating, but doesn't quite wipe them out. So as you can see, in the following turn, we have to win the roll and go with the Order of the Ashen Dawn first. And the important thing there is that if I do manage to do that and kill the Praetorians, I will be able to actually charge something else, like the Cultists, for example. So that's why we want to do that. And then the Hunter Cadre need to go next to be activating against the Kanephors. Alrighty, so here we are here. We have We have activation 1, and it is the Archimandrite and the Praetorians. And this is a surprise to me. I thought that my opponent, if he wins the roll, really should be going with the Kanephors there just so that he can charge the Crimson Tower Knights. But he didn't see it that way. He felt like it was more important to get the spell off and get Bastion up and Memories of Old and maybe do some healing there. Because, it is quite possible that the Crimson Tower Knights don't actually do enough damage to kill the Praetorians here, which is interesting, right? But I would have gone with the Kanephors, because that at the very least means that it completely stops the Crimson Tower Knights from going after the Cultists as well. So I believe that was his best bet to stop me from sweeping 2 regiments. Interesting play. So obviously we've got the Archimandrite able to get a spell off there, probably to heal some Praetorians or something, or attack the Steel Legion, and then the Praetorians to Memories of Old and get Bastion on there and all sorts. So they are activating there and doing their worst. Right. So we then have the Crimson Tower Knights, and of course it is the supremacy turn. So just let me remind myself of what actually happens when that is used. Martial prowess. Okay, so they get flurry there, but this guy gives first bloody +1 attacks and hardened. Okay, so that's why when you look at this photograph, you can sort of see that the Crimson Tower Knights plus character have generated so much output that they wipe out the Praetorian Guards and the character, and then they immediately charge into the Cultists and wipe them out as well, because realistically it is all of those impacts with Terrifying 1. The Cultists don't have animated vessels, so they take resolve checks and die, and of course there's a Caledburn character in there as well. So this is very good for me. It means that I've wiped out 2 regiments. The Crimson Towers are in a position where they're not immediately going to die. And I've got my Steel Legion on the zone. So this is a strong play here for 100 Kingdoms. So we then have the Kanephors attacking the Crimson Tower Knights, but he wasn't positioned well enough that he could get all 3 stands in. I do have hardened against his attacks here, and this means that I'm not going to lose the unit outright, which is critical. That's really important. So there we are there, but more of a close-up on those beautiful statues. I love the sculpts here of this regiment. And then, of course, we've got the Hunter Cadre on this side, able to shoot at a few more of those Centaurs. We want the Fallen Divinity to come after us here because that takes it away from other better targets. Over here, instead of shooting me, he's decided to march charge into the crossbows with his other regiment of Centaurs, just because he knows that the crossbows aren't going to do anything in close combat against this regiment. It's just not going to happen, and it gives him room to move up with the Legionnaires and just start scoring for the rest of the game on that zone. Over here, we've got the other Hunter Cadre, and they are able to simply turn around and fire at that unit of Kanephors off to the left there and relieve a little bit of pressure against the Crimson Towers, of course. Over here, we've got the Fallen Divinity finally getting into combat. It is marching and then charging. It didn't quite have the right angle there to do a charge clash. So this is a march charge, but it still is quite damaging because it's got terrifying and impact hits and all of that. So this is quite punishing against the Steel Legion. But yeah, Steel Legion's still in the zone, so we're looking fine. Over here, the Mage and the crossbows able to fire at the Fallen Divinity, but the problem here is that it's just so tough at this point. I believe it's tier 2, if not tier 3, and it's got reroll 6s, so you can't expect much from the shooting game at this point against the Big Fiend. Over here, we've got some Kheres able to shoot their Insanity spell at the Crimson Tower Knights, doing a ton of damage, and quite painfully leaving them on just 1 wound left, which is why it's crucial that the Crimson Tower Knights try to win the Supremacy a second time, because if they can do that, then they can actually attack the Kheres there and do a lot of damage to them before they are silenced. So yeah, things getting a bit tight. Over here, the Steel Legion attempting to do some damage by combat reforming into the character. This was actually a bit of a mistake because it's terrifying 3, so passing the fighting with fighting combat, what do you call that thing, the combat reform, doing that's quite difficult. But they did it, and they're trying to attack, but they just can't accomplish much against that beast because it's just so strong. It's just so tough at that point. We then have the Kheres / Moroi over here. I think this is, like, just looking at the card that he's using in the background there, I think that is Kheres. So these guys still in a bit of a firefight against the Hunter Cadre and the Gilded Legion. Gilded Legion now charging into the Legionnaires and just massacring them because the width of the unit, like the actual depth of the unit, is enough to stay on the zone while that happens, which is positive. Over here, I've got one single Centaur trying to turn around and get a pot shot off at the Knights to pick them off, but that fails. So, yeah, still have that opportunity. And then, of course, the Legionnaires moving onto the zone on his right flank to start scoring there, which is going to be big. So I am ahead in the scoring game just for the moment, but he could take the lead pretty easily once the Fallen Divinity gets into the middle. So here we are. This is quite important to talk about. The Ashen Dawn are at a spot where if they move to my right flank, there's no point doing that because the Gilded Legion and the Hunter Cadre have already won the day against the Legionnaires and the Kheres. Now, if I go into the middle to try and get the Ashen Dawn fighting against the Fallen Divinity, we're going to be talking about a tier 3 Fallen Divinity, and the Ashen Dawn, although they're very strong, aren't really going to be able to beat the Fallen Divinity, and as soon as it's killed even one stand, it's going to outscore them in the center. But if I go to the left-hand flank, that's where I have the opportunity to eventually kill those Legionnaires and score on that flank. It's just that it's going to take forever to do that, and I'm probably going to be slowed down by a bunch of Centaurs. So they are turning around, they're moving to the left there, and they're going to start the long, slow gallop. And I think you guys can appreciate that if I had had the foresight to deploy them on the left from turn 4, this would be a much easier game, right? So that's how we're looking at the end of this turn. Ashen Dawn have swiveled, but they've got a long march ahead of them to get to that left-hand flank. The right-hand flank is an easy win, and the middle flank is about to become, Fallen Divinity, a win for that. You can see that the Crimson Towers are actually gone now. I believe he had one last activation to hit them with something, so they disappeared, which is disappointing. They would have been brilliant to finish off the Kheres there, because then they may have possibly been able to move around to attack the Legionnaires. But that didn't happen, so here we go. All right, so this is the order for the next turn. We're going with the Mercenary Crossbowmen because I noticed that from this photograph, if he activates the Fallen Divinity first and does a clash on the Steel Legion to kill them, it can charge the Mage's unit and wipe them out, which will prevent the possibility of them jumping onto the zone at a later turn to contest it after he's activated the Fallen Divinity. So I went with them first to get out of its line of sight. That was quite critical. So I did manage to win the roll, and the unit does a bit of a reform and a bit of a turnaround. Then they move back after this just to get out of line of sight of the Fallen Divinity. And quite crucially, back into a position where if the Fallen Divinity charges me, the back of its space isn't going to be touching the zone. So if it does commit to an attack, at least it won't be scoring, and that's the really crucial part of it. All right, so Fallen Divinity easily able to activate here and wipe out the Steel Legion and then reform and just sit there. We've got Hunter Cadre going up against the Centaurs, just shooting them up a little bit more, just peppering them down. We've got this down to one last regiment of Centaurs. These guys, after losing a stand, they reform and they do a bit of shooting back. Bit of a firefight going on there. Over here, this is the Kheres against the Hunter Cadre, against the Legionnaires, against the Gilded Legion, so this is just a bit more of a brawl at this point. Still got 2 stands worth of Hunter Cadre left, which is surprising. They've actually done very, very well in their resolve checks against the Kheres. Over here, though, we have a reform from the Gilded Legion because they've wiped out the Legionnaires. There was at one point where I actually got a supremacy off from the Imperial officer to get the free reform, so this may have been what happened. And you can see that they've stretched themselves out in such a way that the Gilded Legion are on the zone while fighting the Kheres at this point. Over here, the other unit of Kheres just don't really know what to do themselves, they're just trying to turn around, just get a few magical shots off at the Hunter Cadre or whatever they can do. And then, of course, the Ashen just slowly trotting away through here, double marching behind the Hunter Cadre, but we're just a bit too far away, right? So at the end of this turn, you can sort of see what the problem is now. In the late game, the Fallen Divinity is going to score a lot more because it's the middle zone that becomes worth more during the end of the game. So he's got the Legionnaires, which is scoring every turn. I've got the Gilded Legion, which is scoring every turn. I am ahead on points, but the Fallen Divinity will eventually get him to overtake me unless I can get something on that zone to contest it, or unless I can get the Ashen onto that zone on the left. So here is the stack starting us off. Hunter Cadre first to go up against the Centaurs. That's what we've got here, just doing a charge into them to attack them. In fact, this might have been him winning the roll and him attacking me. Either way, there is a combat between the Centaurs and the Hunter Cadre. We've got the Gilded Legion over here, wiping out the remainder of the Kheres, of course. And then on this side, we've got the other unit of Kheres trying to get into the Hunter Cadre here with a bit of a long-range spell. Over here, the Mage just can't really do anything, against the Fallen Divinity. What we're thinking about maybe doing is a double march later on in the game to contest, because we've got 4 stands there. So if I'm able to out-activate him and the Fallen Divinity just activates first, these guys, maybe I'll just squeeze past and stop them from scoring on a crucial turn. So that might be the way. But there's not much else that they can really accomplish at this point. Hunter Cadre, this is just finishing off the last of the Kheres on that side of the battlefield, and then the Ashen double marching around here. The plan is to get onto the zone next turn, but there are still ways that he can get in the way of me there. So we're going to go with Hunter Cadre first to try and deal with the Centaurs on the left, then everything else. So that is the overview. There is a possibility here for me to keep the Hunter Cadre here onto the zone on the right and then do a march with the Gilded Legion onto the middle, but it's going to take them a long time, and we're just really running out of time, which is quite crucial here. So Centaurs against Hunter Cadre at the very end there, and then after killing them, they're able to move forward in the way of the Ashen. This is the first photo where I thought that he ought to move, but he went with this, giving a bit more facing to me. But this is quite crucial because it slows the Ashen down another turn, and he can even move his Legionnaires from that side of the circle to this side of the circle to stop me from even getting onto it. So over here, Fallen Divinity just blocking off the way onto the zone from the crossbows as it should. These guys marching up while the Hunter Cadre take the zone. They're still just too far away from that middle zone to capture it though. And then Ashen charging and wiping out the Centaurs, but they'd rather not be slowed down by that. It is a clean kill, but just too little too late. All right, so Ashen going first. This is so they can move on to the zone. And there you can sort of see the situation. He's literally just got his Legionnaires and his Fallen Divinity, and that's it. I've got several regiments here, but it's turning out to be a bit too late. So what we've got is the Ashen wanting to go first, of course, and they march onto the zone. But you can see the problem, can't you? Like, they're not attacking the Legionnaires this turn, and they're not even preventing the scoring of the Legionnaires because they've got that stupid Memories of Old where they count as additional stands for scoring, so my opponent can still score in this zone, which does mean that when he moves up here, the game is just lost. I mathematically lost on points. Not by many points, it was a win of like a few objective points at the end, but this was disappointingly a loss for 100 Kingdoms, even though materially I did play quite well. I feel like I do only have myself to blame, though, because the deployment of the Ashen was not optimal. They should have just gone up the left-hand flank there, and I think you guys can probably agree that if I'd made that correct decision, this would have been an easy win. Of course, the list itself wasn't really very good. Really, with 100 Kingdoms, the best way to play at the moment is to take lots of activations and lots of medium regiments and just, a few light regiments and at most one heavy regiment. You don't want to be taking multiple heavies that all have to roll together, because then you have some stuff coming on too late like you did in this particular game. But really fun one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back with another bat rep soon. It'll be 100 Kingdoms and Euroni, so don't miss that one. But in the meantime, stay well.